Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of 30 Minutes Robotic Milking Edition. I'm your host, Marcia Andrews, Dairy Science Professor and Extension Specialist at the University of Minnesota in St. Paul. With us today is also your co-host, Jim Sulphur, Dairy Extension Educator at the St. Cloud Regional Office. Good morning, Jim. Thanks for joining us on the snowy day today.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, welcome everybody to snowy Minnesota.
Yeah. Anyway, so who is connecting there? This is strange. Somebody's using your account, Jim. I see somebody else there looking. What's going
I think
on?
that's Isaac.
Oh, okay. You're not supposed to share your link with him, Jim, and he should be using the participant link. But anyway, we'll know this for next time. Thank you, Isaac. So anyway, we are today following the same rules as usual. And also I want to remind you that the episodes are recorded, but if you want to join us live and you're watching the recording today, go to z.umn.edu/30minrm to join the live discussion, the live virtual discussion. We are going to be using the Q&A box for questions. Please do not use the chat. Jim and I will be monitoring the Q&A box only for questions. We'll be reading the question on your behalf or your comment, and the producer will answer the question for us. Since many of you here probably are interested in dairy technology, I want to also use this opportunity to advertise about our upcoming event in June, Precision Dairy Conference in Bloomington, Minnesota, a 5-minute ride from the airport and very close to the Interstate 494 for you guys driving, easy approach, free parking. And we're planning to have, again, to be confirmed, but approximately 15 dairy producers and different panels sharing their experience with dairy technology. That's not just robotic milking, but all types of dairy technology. So let's come together to learn from the end users and to basically network on this topic, which is a very cool topic in the whole world of technology. Today, we're very pleased to have a producer actually that has more than just robotic milking as their technology on their farm. And he's joining us from Minnesota. Hi, Rick. Thank you for joining us on this very snowy day. At least for us here, it's very snowy. So
good to be with you guys. Yeah, it is snowing outside, which is fine, I guess. It's that time of year, and it's been a little short on snow the last few years. So yeah, it's fun to have something different. Yeah, I'll just start with a little background, I guess, about me and my farm. So I grew up here, family farm. My dad farmed with 2 of his brothers, and basically milked in a double 12 herringbone parlor. And the cows were in a freestall barn. I think it's probably been 10 years or so ago. Let me back up a little bit. So I was born and raised here. At that time, there were 3 families being supported off of this farm, and we milked about 170 cows or so. So there really wasn't room for me and my wife and our new family joining the operation at that point. I was basically off the farm for about 10 years doing construction. I owned my own construction company, and did that with always the intention of coming back to the farm and raising my family here and taking over the farm someday. So we were pretty intentional about coming back to the farm. We moved our family back right on the farm here, and then I guess I farmed alongside my dad and his 2 brothers for several years. And then, tragedy struck. My dad ended up passing away in a farm accident. And then at that point, it wasn't about a year later, me and my wife took over the dairy portion of the farm entity, and my uncles are continuing to cash crop to this day. So yeah, we were milking in the parlor at that time, and we knew that wasn't very sustainable long term, just with obviously labor challenges. Typically we'd have a couple high school kids that would just help with milking shifts. But, basically it went from three different guys involved in the dairy. And if, somebody was gone, it wasn't a big deal, but now it was basically me and my wife and our young children. And so we were pretty intentional about going into robotics. We had been, I guess, interested in robotics for probably 8 years prior to us taking over the dairy here. And so we've been on a lot of farm tours. We were at I think it was called the Precision Dairy Conference down in Rochester. I believe it was the first one held. And so that was pretty eye-opening just to see different setups and yeah, so I guess we thought that maybe, but we knew we needed a new facility because our old freestall was pretty worn out and pretty cramped, and cow comfort was, not the greatest. And so we needed a whole new facility, and obviously would want to incorporate robotics into this. So we designed this building basically with the intention of the robotic feeding system, milking robots, and the collectors to clean up the floors as well. So we are just our feed alleys are narrower because of the the robotic feeding system doesn't need, you obviously don't need it wide enough to drive a tractor through. And then we do have the capability of feeding basically all the way around the pens on all 4 sides. So that alley goes around the entire, I guess, inside perimeter of the structure. Let me just see. So yeah, I talked about the design, the decision to build. Yeah, so basically we have three rows of head-to-head stalls. We have DCC water beds, and we bed with basically sawdust. And I don't know how other people bed, but I think we bed fairly heavy for water beds, mainly because I like dry stalls and clean cows. And so we bed let me see here. We bed basically one to 2 times, or excuse me, once every week or 2, pretty heavy with a side shooter and a skid loader just to kind of load up the fronts of the stalls. And then on a daily basis, we bed with a bob man. I don't know if they're called a bedding machine, but basically we put down a small layer of sawdust and lime on the back of the stalls as we go around and scrape, and we just do that once a day. Yeah, you can see here in this slide, I have 3 milking robots. They're all kind of in a line, and they're split up into 2 different robot rooms. I really wanted to keep them all in one room. I liked touring other facilities that just had it all in one room. It was very, very simple, but I could not do that with I wanted the capabilities of the robots to be able to sort to a sort pen or a separation pen. And so I had to have basically a little crossover tunnel between it'd be robot 1 and robot 2 and 3. And which we end up using that, I guess, the sorting capabilities pretty much on a daily basis. I have I guess a post-fresh group in that sort pen where we keep fresh heifers for 1 to 2 weeks, just so it's easy to get them trained to the robot, and we can milk them more times a day without disturbing the main lactation group to find those animals. I also use the sorting for all of my breeding. So when a cow is in heat and I get an alert on my phone, typically through the Horizon app, I determine whether I'm going to sort her for breeding. And typically when it's about the right time to breed them, they are already in that sort pen. And again, it's just a good management tool to be able to get jobs done quickly and get those cows bred at the right time. And then we also use the sorting gates for, any cows, obviously, that we're going to dry off, or hoof trimming. I'll set them up for sorting a few hours prior to the trimmer arriving. And then it's a huge management tool. We really enjoy it. Really glad I did it, even though I don't have all my robots in one room. Let's see. So you can see the picture on the right of your screen. That is basically after fetching cows. We have a scissor gate that's normally folded up along robot 1 and out of the way. But as we fetch the cows, we wrap that scissor gate around the 4 or 5 cows that need to be sorted. And we basically have the same thing on the other end of the barn at robot 3. A scissor gate as well to create a temporary pen, just to make sure those cows obviously get milked. And then between that, thanks Marcia for going back there. There is a gate between that sort pen and the cows that are fetched there. And that gate is set up as a bump gate. So the cows in the sorting area can still visit the milking robot as they want, just by bumping that gate over. So and then obviously those cows that are going to continue to be sorted, the post fresh ones will be directed back to that pen. So again, really glad I did that just for fresh cows, fresh heifers. Moving on. So on the picture on your left, that is my calving pen. Most of the time it is big enough, but it's one of the things I would have done differently. I would have made that pen larger. We typically have it bedded with either sawdust or corn straw. But all the calves are born there. They get fed the close-up ration with the robotic feeding system. And it's that calving pen is basically right adjacent to my dry cow pens and my post fresh pen. So it's even though they may have a pen change, it is not far. It's basically just on the other side of a dividing gate, just to reduce stress and make it easier for us to handle them. Picture on the right is our foot bath. That is located on the far end of the barn, away from the milking robots. We use a copper sulfate at the moment, and we will run those cows or walk them through 4 days a week. So typically Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday morning, basically as we're going through the stalls with me and typically a couple of my kids, just scraping out the manure and hitting them with the bob man just to get a little fresh sawdust in the back and a little lime. We will just basically intentionally move the cows out of 2 of the alleys, and so they're all kind of penned up on one side of the barn. And then when we are out of the pen with the bob man, we will then open up the foot bath, and they essentially walk through on their own. It really only takes about maybe 15 minutes for about 175 cows right now to walk through. So not too hard, just part of our daily or morning chores. So like I said, we clean the floors with the Lely collectors. We have 3 of those. You can see that one is just basically docked at its charging station. And then directly in front of it is the small dump pit that dumps into the adjacent cross pit across the whole barn. So I have 3 of those that do the entire barn, and there's about 225 or 230 animals in this barn, and they typically keep the floors adequately cleaned. Most of the time they do their thing. I don't have to worry about them, and once in a while, obviously one gets lost, and I have to maybe adjust the tire size. But other than that, very glad I installed that technology. For the most part, I don't touch them on a daily basis, and they do their job, and I don't have to clean the floors off usually with a skid loader or alley scrapers. So there's our Bobman bedding machine. So as we're going through getting the cows out of the way, scraping the manure off the stalls, one of my sons will come basically right behind us, and he'll hit it with a little layer of sawdust and some lime on the back third of the stall. And there is, our vector feeding system. So my feed kitchen, and we use the grabber, and then we do have a block cutter to bring in corn silage and haylage. And then we also have some dry grass hay there. You'll see piled up on the floor for the dry cow ration. We've also incorporated wheat straw bales, baleage. And then we have 4 bins that use flex augers to bring in different commodities that dump right into the MFR. So the kitchen, we fill about typically once a day. If we wanted to, we could put enough feed in there for probably 2 days, but I guess just it's part of our daily routine, and just to keep fresh feed in there. Typically we'll put fresh feed in once a day. So the robotic feeding system, we have 1 MFR for our amount of cows. It does not have to travel outside of the barn to feed any young stock. We do have a small group of, I guess, of pregnant heifers in part of the barn that we are feeding at the moment, which wasn't our intention, but we had a little room in here and we kind of ran out of room in our bred heifer pen. So it's nice having the capability of feeding basically as many different types of rations as we'd like for different groups in this barn. So as it's traveling around, it pushes the feed up closer to the cows, and then it will dispense feed for whatever part of the barn that needs some more. And those are pretty customizable to how much feed you want always in front of the cows. Typically in the summer, we'll drop that down just so we don't get feed that is getting hot as it's sitting there, just to keep it a little fresher. But then I guess it doesn't have as much room for error if something goes wrong or needs some maintenance. We just don't have that, extra feed sitting in front of the cows. So it gets to be a little bit of a management issue there, just keeping on top of things. I'm trying to think here. Should we go right to questions? I'm sure I missed some things.
No, I think you did a great job, but let's see if we have questions. That's excellent, Rick. I mean, very good overview. Of course, you have more technology than just robotics, so it takes a little bit more time to go through all that. So beautiful barn all together, all cows under one roof. Very nice facility. Jim and I were there not too long ago, I guess about a year and a few months, but nice facility, great family. So thank you for joining us. We'll open up for questions now. The farm is located in Minnesota, yes. So this is a Minnesota farm. Again, as you guys know, I tend not to specifically tell the location of the farm, but this is a Minnesota farm. So on a day like today with the snow, it's kind of nice to have all animals under one roof and have that feeding system there, right, Rick? That really is kind of nice.
I can talk a little bit about, so we did a cross-ventilated barn that's essentially fully insulated. We didn't want, obviously, since we had to build a new facility, we've seen other facilities that are retrofitted, and when it does get real cold, they have problems with the robots, will freeze up and have to put extra heat in the robot rooms. So we wanted to avoid that if possible, and really with this barn, it is very comfortable almost any season, even when it is 20 below zero and blowing outside. Typically there's still a few fans exhausting air and bringing in fresh air, and it really doesn't get much below 40 degrees in the barn. So, and that's important, obviously, with the robotic manure scrapers to not have frozen alleys. And so I'm really pleased with, I guess, how the building performs just with the weather, and then obviously in the heat of the summer, the one wall is wide open with the curtain, and the fans are pulling air through there. So very comfortable all year round.
So the scraper has worked well, independent of season. I hear sometimes like if it gets a little dry, you have to spray a little bit of water in front of it. So it kind of.
So we'll manage that, obviously in the summer with the fans pulling air through the barn, it does tend to dry out a little bit more, but you know, you can adjust any route to have water sprayed or to not. So typically seasonally, I'll just change that just so the floors aren't too wet or too dry, but
Okay,
it hasn't really been a problem.
sounds good. Jim, we have a question on feeding here, if you want to take that one.
Yeah, do you just want to come in and you're feeding that was kind of on pellet intake? How many pounds of pellets I'm
Or if you
assuming
feed
can you
pellet at all.
feed, or completely PMR yet? What do you
Yeah.
feed through the robot? Maybe
Yeah.
that's part of the question.
Okay, so I've played around with that a little bit, obviously, just because it's easy to change things and just to see how the cows respond. Right now I'm feeding 2 different pellets at the milking robots. I'm doing something that I don't really know if anybody else is doing. One of the things I was struggling with was feeding mineral through my MFR, through the feeding robot. And, you know, it was basically pretty, sandy or coarse from one of my bins. And it had actually wore through my flex auger about a year into, startup, just from the abrasive, nature of the mineral. And so then we were adding in a bunch of other, wheat mids and other components to fluff it up, to lighten it up. Well, it just, it adds costs and all that. So in the last few months, I've asked my feed company if they could make a pellet that I could feed at the robot that would have the mineral in the pellet already. And, they were kind of like, well, they took quite some time to develop a pellet that they were comfortable with. And we launched that. And actually I'm very pleased with it. I haven't seen any negative responses or drops in visits. And it did save me a little bit of money because then I don't have to feed, because I have to feed a pellet anyway at the robot to bring the cows. And so now I'm basically, accomplishing two tasks with one solution.
There's one pellet, so you don't have 2 types of pellet, just one
Well,
pellet.
I do have another type of pellet.
Okay.
I have a high pellet for my high cows. So
Okay.
so I'm able to maybe feed them a little cheaper there. And then hopefully not wear out my flex augers that feed the MFR. And then it frees up another bin so I can feed, something else through the flex augers if I'd like.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, not very common.
Pellet intake, on average, I'm about 11 pounds of pellet per 100 pounds of milk.
Okay.
So which I believe is maybe a little bit lower than average.
Not anymore. People are feeding less pellets lately, so.
Yeah, I mean, I've tried to feed less just because, obviously inputs are so high right now.
Right.
Trying to do the most with what I have. So
makes sense. Okay, there's another question related to feeding here, more related to your feed kitchen, actually. The slicer for the pile, do you need to make your feed pile so high? A question about the height of, maybe as the time I took the picture, I don't know, but question about that.
No, the grabber will grab pretty much. I mean, I'm sure I can't make it too high, otherwise it wouldn't be able to drop and grab it efficiently. But the dry ingredients will pile pretty high, and then it'll last us a week or 2 for that, like the grass hay for our dry cow ration. And then really we can't, we've been bringing in corn silage loose this winter, just trying something different. So we have a block cutter, and it's really great for loading the MFR efficiently. It can take nice grabs, but the problem we're having is mainly in the summer, and this is basically because of the size of our bunker, which isn't big, but it's about 33 feet wide and 12 feet high. And by the time we get, we'll take a block out of here and a block out of here. And by the time we get back to that old block area, it is, the feed on the corn silage on the top that's kind of loose of that block is pretty hot. And we're just having some problems with yeast in our
interesting
at the bunk. The feed would get hot faster. So we ended up getting a shaver this fall, and obviously the temps have been cooler, but we're bringing it in loose and basically taking a few inches or 6 inches off a day or so off of our pile, so it's consistent.
Sounds good. Yeah, makes sense.
So trying different things, seeing what works, and you know,
Right.
everything has its ups and downs.
Right, of course. Jim, do you have the next question maybe there?
Sure. It seems like there's a lot of questions
The
related to
vector, yep.
feeding.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is kind of, do you want to talk about your processing of feed? So they talked about baleage. How long do you run your vector? Do you grind your corn when you get it in? So your grains, how many different grains do you add into the vector feeder? Maybe a little bit about processing, what that looks like.
Okay. Yeah, so what I've noticed, I guess before moving into this barn, we were feeding a lot of baleage, and with a, you know, typical, you know, TMR wagon on a tractor, and having to, you know, process it just to, you know, get that particle length down. When we moved into here, we switched right away to chopping almost all of our hay. So we have haylage, corn silage, we have grass hay, and then we do have some baleage. Excuse me, just because, you know, basically when our bunker's full and we have a little more hay to make, we'll bale it and wrap it. So we've fed some baleage, but only at a small rate. And our baler does have knives on it, so it is fairly, you know, processed already. The baleage that we do use in the kitchen, we found out that it's most efficient to put the bale through what I call it like a bale dismantler. It's just a skid loader attachment. It has some rollers with some sickle knives in the bottom, and we put the bale in there and then just let it fall out the bottom. I think it's mainly used for bedding situations, like in a pack situation, but I just bought it just to basically tear apart baleage, one bale at a time, and it basically just breaks up the bale into a somewhat loose pile, so that grabber can grab smaller amounts more efficiently. And that's mainly since I'm only feeding a few pounds of that in my ration. I don't want really large, you know, bites of that from the grabber, just because it'd be too much and my efficiencies would be, you know, pretty low on grabs for that.
Makes sense.
The one thing that we do have to do for our dry grass hay, if it is, we run it through a bale processor. We have a Teagle with the knives in it, so it's fairly short. It's probably a 2-inch length or so. If it's not that short, we found out that the cows will obviously sort a lot more, and obviously it's a drier ration and they're looking for the goodies, and so the dry cows will sort really bad, and then it'll, every time the MFR goes around the barn, it pushes feed up and it ends up basically bulldozing that sorted feed further and further down the feed bunk. And that typically doesn't happen with the processed grass hay. So just from standpoint of efficiencies and having and just eliminating the sorting, it's much better to have things processed somewhat, or for the most part, so that the MFR doesn't have to cut anything up.
Makes sense. So we're going to answer one last question before I stop recording. And then if you could stay with us for just a few more minutes, Rick, then to answer the other questions we still have. So yep. This might be interesting to record because it's asking, what is the biggest challenge that you have faced with the MFR, and what was the greatest benefit that you found using it?
Okay, I'll start with benefit. I would say just from a time standpoint, when I was feeding in the parlor, and I don't have a lot of labor. I just have basically just a 2 or 3 part-time, school age kids that come, after school. And so they help with the basics, but something like feeding is pretty important to be accurate. So I'd mix all the feed, prior to a milking shift, and it just takes up a lot of time during the day. And obviously, and then the other thing was a lot of fuel. I mean, that tractor's running at high RPM for quite a while, especially with feeding baleage in there, just to process that down. So I guess moving to the robotic feeding system, it's basically taken all that away. I don't really spend any time, obviously, mixing feed. The only time that we have involved is bringing feed to the kitchen. And again, that's something that I don't typically do. That's something either my 15-year-old son does or one of our employees does. And it kind of takes, I don't have to worry about the cows getting the right ration as long as they can put feed in the right spot in the kitchen, which isn't too hard. And then just keep that kitchen managed. And so it uses up the older feed first, which isn't too hard to train. So I guess that's been probably the most beneficial. Is it frees up my time. It saves a ton of fuel. Seems like wear and tear on equipment is much less because it doesn't have to process baleage. Obviously it might be different for other farms that are feeding baleage, but I can still be pretty accurate. I really like the small batches of feed fed many times a day. I think it probably brings a batch out maybe 20 times a day or more. It seems like it's almost doing a load an hour. And so always having fresh feed somewhere in the barn and not having that rush to the bunk, when feeding time comes, because it's all the time.
Okay.
One thing that I don't like about it is, oh gosh, I'm trying to think here. Okay, the one thing I don't like about it is if there is a problem with the system, I don't have a lot of time to get that thing up and running because cows will run out of feed and then it takes a little bit of time to catch up. So there's been a few circumstances, not many, but where, some part malfunctioned or needed to be replaced. And, since it's somewhat new technology, even though the technicians are great, some of this stuff they haven't personally dealt with because it's fairly new.
Right, so new, yep.
And so there's just a little bit of frustration with maybe, when a problem happens, how do we get this up and running as quickly as possible?
Makes sense.
But other than that, super happy with it.
All right. Excellent, Rick. So I'm going to officially stop the recording. I want to thank everybody for attending this episode of Robotic Milking Edition, and especially thank you, Rick, for taking the time and telling us all this. It's very new for everybody. That's why questions came a lot about feeding. And I'd like to invite everybody to come back to the next episode on February 17th. So thank you, everyone, and we'll see you then.